Hi SLIS 701 students. So far in this series of videos, we have covered accessing electronic databases through the library's homepage and how to find journal holdings and journal articles by citation. This video will help you to recognize the differences between certain source types and how to best evaluate sources for use in research projects. In the first video, I briefly mentioned that as far as source types go, you will likely engage with all types of periodical literature, that is, scholarly journals, professional periodicals, and popular periodicals. In order to use these types of sources for research, it is important to understand the characteristics of each so that you can use them as effectively as possible. Scholarly journals are going to be those that publish articles written and then reviewed by scholars and other experts in a specific field, a process known as peer review. These will often be PhD holding faculty members and other advanced level researchers. This is scholarship written by experts for experts. This literature is often meant to advance, confirm, or critique important movements in a certain field of study. This literature will also make up the bulk of what you will be expected to use to initiate, back up, and generally inform the research endeavors you will be producing as a graduate student. Professional or trade publications are not subjected to the peer review process, though depending on the quality of the publication, will go through a varying level of editorial review. These publications are mostly geared toward readers in a particular field or occupation and are usually meant to help inform and update those readers about trends and movements within a given field. Library Journal, for example, a trade publication that specifically targets librarians and library professionals, is a good example of a trade publication. Popular sources, that is, magazines and newspapers, as well as news websites in general, especially things like blogs, are sources that are meant to target general audiences, hoping to capture as many readers as possible. The language used in these publications tend to be geared toward laymen, and if jargon is used, it is often explained right away, whereas professional and scholarly work expect specific knowledge from their readers. The library has an electronic resource that can help with determining a publication's type and scope. If you ever have a question about a particular publication, I recommend using Ulrich's Web Global Serials Index to find out more information about it. Ulrich's Web can be found from the databases page by clicking U, or it is also in the Library and Information Science subject area. Either way is fine, but you're looking for Ulrich's Web Global Serials Directory. And from here, you can search and find out information about particular publications. So the example from the previous slide had the Journal of Academic Librarianship. If you wanted to find out a little bit more about the publication in general, you can go here and find out several things. Journal of Academic Librarianship, and you look for the listing. You find out right away that it's from the UK, and you find out who the particular publisher is, but more importantly, you find things like, is this refereed? Yes. And refereed here is the exact same as peer review. It's just a synonym for that. And you'll get a description, and you usually even get content type. And here we find that it's academic scholarly. So if you ever had a question, so Library Journal, for example, is a good one to try. So if we looked up Library Journal, even though it has that name journal in it, when you click on it, and you can even find out from the results that it's a serial type magazine, not journal. They say, usually in Ulrich's, when they say journal, they mean scholarly or peer reviewed, and so they use magazine to differentiate that. And so for Library Journal, we find out that it is in the US, it's been around for a real long time, but serial type is magazine. You notice that there is no mention of there being it being refereed, and then you even find out content type trade, and then it even gives a nice description, contains news and events, articles identifying trends and reviews of books, etc. So you can get a good idea of what the scope of that publication is just from looking at its information here. So anytime you need to know the nature of a periodical that you're potentially going to use as a source, check it out in Ulrich's Web, see what you can find out. There's also lots of other uses for this that might be relevant in your later classes, or perhaps even this one, where if you do need to find out more information, like if it is indexed in a certain area, you can get information about the abstracting and indexing of a particular publication. As you engage with research, you will learn that there are two major types of research article outputs. This would be primary research and secondary research. Primary, or firsthand from the original researcher or an original document, or primary research articles present the findings of original research, usually in the form of some type of experiment or method of data collection. Most primary research articles are published in a specific way, where they each contain specific sections, that is, an introduction, a methodology section, a results section, and a discussion or conclusion found from those results. Secondary, in this context, refers to second-hand reporting on others' research or writing about an original document. When you write a research paper that mostly uses other sources to back up your claims, you are participating in secondary research output. Another key part of research is knowing how and when to evaluate the sources you're going to be using for your research projects. Here are some guidelines of things you should be evaluating for each source that you're going to use. These are authorship or authority, intent and or objectivity, accuracy and or credibility, and currency. Authorship or authority really refers to who's responsible for the content that you're using. So who wrote it? What are the author's credentials? Are these PhD holding authors? Are these reporters? All of that's going to matter based on what the article is. If it's a scholarly article, it better be written by a scholar and therefore peer-reviewed by other scholars. If it's not, if it's a news or magazine article, then a reporter with some level of knowledge on the topic should still be important. Also think about what the author's reputation is in their field. Are they currently employed at a university? What is their educational background? And also think about what organization is sponsoring or publishing the information. If it's a scholarly journal article, likely the publisher is a scholarly publication, and it will go through the strenuous peer review process. However, especially with how we can have access to so much information, you do want to know who is behind why you are being able to even see this. So knowing anything about publisher or sponsors of the information can be very helpful, and this can help appease any issues of bias or any sorts of conflicts of interest. So thinking about the authorship is going to be very important when choosing which resources to use for your research projects. Another important thing to evaluate that's related to authorship is the intent or objectivity of a source. So think about what the ultimate purpose of a source is. If it's a scholarly work, it's most likely to advance some level of research on a specific topic in that field. Think about any sponsoring organization's mission. This is especially important for web-based information. If you're getting data from the CDC, that mission would be to promote health measures or information that would be specific to a health-related issue. But if the sponsoring organization is, say, a pharmaceutical drug company, then it's really the mission is going to be to sell that drug for whatever that issue might be. Think about whether or not your source appears to be biased. In other words, does it use biased or charged language? This will be covered a little bit more in just a second. Think about who the intended audience is. Again, thinking about things like CDC, you would think it would be the public and anybody that would be affected by health-related issues. CDC, of course, being Center of Disease Control. And also think about whether or not your source promotes a specific perspective or agenda. And if it does, is the topic viewed from multiple perspectives, which could be very important in figuring out how valuable or accurate and credible and reliable a source might be. And when looking at media pieces, really pay attention to things like news, the difference between news and editorials and commentary. I think if you find a valuable editorial or piece of commentary that helps broaden your perspective or helps you generate some ideas, that's totally fine to use. However, if it is a source that you're going to cite, citing it and making sure to note that it is in fact an editorial could be important, because you don't want to pass on somebody else's ideas necessarily. You want to use them as a jumping off point for sure, but also you don't want to cite an editorial or a piece of commentary as news. I think we're seeing that in today's political and news cycle climate, and we're seeing that people really do have trouble telling the difference between news and editorial. And the other reason I bring this up is because it is not uncommon for scholarly journals to publish editorials and commentary. They want to publish the words and thoughts of advanced professionals in certain fields, and sometimes that can be done outside of a specific study, and so scholarly journals will publish editorials and commentary. Just keep an eye out for that if you find something like that in your results, and it will come up and it will say academic journal article, but when you click into it, you can usually tell pretty quickly by the language used. Oftentimes it will be in first person. Likely it would be written in first person, and it wouldn't necessarily be the reporting of research results, but rather analysis or commentary on research within the field. Another important element when considering a source is its accuracy or credibility. Is the information presented factual? One way to tell is checking how well the sources are listed and whether or not the sources can help verify the information. In scholarly work, sources are cited throughout, but in non-scholarly work, they might not be. So can you find out if the information presented is indeed factual? Are statistics cited? If so, how? And are collection methods disclosed? In scholarly work, they certainly should be. In popular or trade publications, statistics are often used and oftentimes will be cited, but they might be cited in a very piecemeal way. So that's the importance of being able to track down other work like we looked at in the electronic journals and Google Scholar lecture. Are there obvious or numerous typos or misspellings? Even if you're looking at what you would ostensibly consider a piece of scholarship, if you are seeing lots of typos, misspellings, and weird formatting, I would start questioning it. That's a really telltale sign that something's a little fishy. So if there are obvious typos, I would think that would detract from the credibility of the particular source. And then also, can the information presented be corroborated? In other words, are other sources reporting the same or similar things? If so, then you're probably onto something. If not, then you might really want to consider reevaluating that source, or evaluating it further at least. The currency or a publication date of a certain source can also be very important. So think about what is the publication date of a source. That's certainly something you'll need to know for a citation, but it's also something you want to know for how you're going to incorporate a source into your research. When was the last date that piece of information was updated? In other words, is this source 10, 20 years old? Does it need to be updated? How recent are the sources that are cited? Is the information up to date enough for the topic you're researching? If you're researching the use of social media and you found an article from 1985, there's a good chance that social media is referring to something like chain mail letters or something that's wildly different to what we consider social media now. So think about that scope of your research endeavor, what time frame would be most appropriate to collect sources from, and that will really inform the currency portion of how you're going to evaluate your sources. And finally, the most important evaluative element is relevance, and really how relevant a source is to your particular research endeavor. Does the source contribute to your research question and assignment? How well do the ideas found in that particular source relate to the general and specific elements of the assignment question and your arguments that are helping to answer that question? Does the source pass the test of the previous elements? If so, and it's very relevant to your research endeavor, then you're probably using a pretty good source. And these are the types of things that you want to consider for every single source that you want to incorporate into your research projects. So hopefully this will provide you with some really good, quick and dirty guidelines to evaluating sources for use in research. And of course, looking over a source that you might want to use that you might feel questionable is something that I can also help with myself and any of the other research and instruction librarians. So definitely at any point, if you're like, I really am not sure about this source, as it really fits the parameters of my assignment, or if it's really as relevant as I think it is, or maybe you are looking at something that you just don't have a good feeling about, let us know. We'll go through it with you and let you know what we think of the particular source that you have found. So definitely keep that in mind as you research here at USC.